Hi, Misha here, and I'm recording this on February 2nd, and probably will get it up the next day or so. And because it's winter, and because it's basically the anniversary of when this aircraft went into service in Finland, I thought we would look back at the British Gloster Gladiator. In the past, I have shown you this model here. This is of the Sea Gladiator variant, as it served in Malta in April of 1940. It's kind of distinctive because it has a 3-bladed propeller. And this version here, you haven't seen before, is a Swedish J8A on skis, as it was used in Finland during the Winter War, namely January and February of 1940. Both models are from Corgi. Both are 1/72 scale. And quite interestingly and neat, this one came with a diorama rather than a more traditional base. So we have this little cabin here, and then we have kind of the ski tracks of where the plane landed. And of course it's fully removable, it's just sitting on here. It's a die-cast model. But yeah, I thought this was neat and different. I actually really like this diorama. It's pretty spiffy. The Gladiator really only came in 3 versions with not a lot of difference. There was the original Mark I, then the Mark II, which had a more powerful engine, and then the Sea Gladiator, that had necessary gear to operate off of carrier decks, arrestor hooks, and whatnot. But that was really it. There was no major change in armament, ability, because by the time the Gladiator actually was put into production and service, it was already quite obsolescent. This plane dates back to 1930, when the RAF first decided it needed a new interceptor. It had just really started going with the Bulldog, but it wanted a high-performance plane that could do at least 250 miles per hour, had better range, endurance, altitude, and most importantly, at the time, it was able to carry at least 4 machine guns. Previous interceptors only carried 2, .303 caliber. Well, Gloster responded with something they already had on the design board, known as the SS-37. Pretty traditional biplane. It was even open cockpit back then. But it did mount 4 machine guns, and initially was capable of just over 240 miles per hour. It first flew in September of 1934. Then in April of 1935, the first sample was sent to the RAF for testing. A few improvements were made. For example, they went to an enclosed cockpit, which is pretty unique for a biplane. They also went to a new propeller and upgraded the engine. And this allowed it to get over 250 miles per hour, which the RAF needed. So in June of 1935, they ordered 23, but the order was quickly increased as the political situation with Germany was rapidly deteriorating. And the RAF received their first Gladiator Mark Is in February of 1937. And they would use them to equip a number of squads, but however, by 1938, the Hurricane and even the Spitfire were starting to come online. New monoplane designs, making the Gladiator almost immediately obsolete. Nevertheless, Gloster would produce just under 750. They would build nearly 500 for the RAF, although some of these would be diverted. They would also build nearly 100 for the Navy, the Sea Gladiator, and the rest would be for export. Basically, this would be kind of a transitional plane between older open cockpit biplanes and later monoplanes. But these were stationed in the UK in 1939, and a couple of squadrons were sent to France and fought in 1940. They also saw service in Norway. And this one here, as I said, is actually from Malta. During the siege of Malta in 1940, when the legend is that 3 of these held off the Italians. In reality, there was more than 3, but nevertheless, they did put a noble effort in. And by June, July, they were started to be replaced by Hurricanes. As I said, this aircraft is capable of 250 miles per hour. It can get up to about 32,000 feet, thanks to the close cockpit. It has 4 .303 caliber machine guns, although the Sea Gladiator was being tested with an additional 2 machine guns for a total of 6, but this never actually went into production and use as far as we know. It's about 27.5 feet long, a wingspan of just over 32 feet. It wasn't a bomber, it was a dedicated interceptor. Since it was becoming more and more obsolete, a lot were transferred to North Africa and the Mediterranean, where they would go up against Italian aircraft. But in a lot of ways, the use by Finland and Sweden would be more important than even the British use. This was adopted into the Swedish Air Force as the J8 for the Mark I and the J8A for the Mark II. Beginning in January of 1940, Sweden would send around 12 of these to Finland to work as a volunteer force to help defend the north of the country against the invading Russians. And these Swedish aircraft would actually fly under Finnish markings, but would still be piloted by Swedish volunteers. But Finland itself would have some Gladiators. It would purchase 20 from Britain and then be given another 10 as kind of war aid, so it had about 30. And these would be delivered during the early part of 1940. So all in all, about 42 of these were operating in Finland during the Winter War. and they would continue to be flown, at least the Finnish ones, during the continuation war. And much like how Finland made very good with the American F2 Buffalo, Finland would make quite good with the Gladiator. They would have 45 air victories and have 2 aces thanks to this aircraft, at a cost of around a dozen planes of theirs. In fact, the final air victory recorded for a Gladiator took place on February 15th, 1943, when a Finnish pilot shot down a Soviet plane. Sweden, too, would have some success. Swedish Gladiators would shoot down 8 aircraft and destroy a few more on the ground. So over 50 Russian planes, close to 60 if you count the ones destroyed on the ground, were lost to Gladiators. And as you see with this model, some were fitted with skis so they could land on frozen lakes or even just snow, giving them a good bit of versatility. But really, by 1943, even though these planes were officially still in service till 1945, they were, just grossly outclassed. So, by then, that was it for the Gladiator. And of course, production would be over by 1939, when the last Mark IIs would roll off the factory, and then they've of course transitioned over to newer aircraft. In a way, it's actually a very good thing that Gloster didn't put a lot of energy into designing this aircraft. They just did exactly what the RAF needed. They didn't waste a lot of resources developing it because new and better, more modern things were already on the horizon. And of course, as we know, Gloster would go on to make the Gloster Meteor, so quite a leap ahead compared with the Gladiator. It wasn't a bad plane, it was just caught up in that big transition with new tech. So they did the right thing. But just minimum effort, so they didn't waste it. And luckily the RAF wasn't committed to this fully and had newer planes like the Hurricane and Spitfire ready to go. But a neat part of history. And if nothing else, having a biplane with an enclosed cockpit is pretty distinctive. You see this one has the regular 2-bladed propeller. I believe the 3-bladed came... I should have looked it up. It wasn't from this aircraft when they used it on Malta. It was either from a Bristol or Wellington. It was from a different aircraft, but needs must and all that. And on Malta, they often quickly repaired and retrofitted these as needed. It's even said that they might have mounted extra machine guns on these in the field there, but we don't really know. And of course, Finland and Sweden made do. I've done a video on newer Swedish aircraft, so you might check that out if you're interested. I've always enjoyed their Air Force history. And of course, both Finland and Sweden's position in World War II was quite interesting. But this is a really neat model from Corgi. The skis are articulated, so you can move them. And this diorama is just kind of neat. Little ad hoc airfield, as it were. Little shack. But not sure why they chose to make a diorama with this one, but it's even one my wife likes. She actually thought it was a pretty neat scene, so yeah. With that, I just thought I would make another Gloster video showing you this thing. But yeah, if you liked it, if you could, like, share, and subscribe. But if you have any questions or just want to talk Glosters, as always, I'd love to do so in the comments below. Well, with that said, this is Misha, and I'll catch you very soon next time.